welcome to Up Close with Carlos Sang, celebrating art, entertainment, and the human spirit. Dee Ahluwalia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for having me.
So when you finished playing Karim in Stratford earlier this year, did you feel like you were done with this role and with this show, or was there still more that you wanted to explore with this character?
Well, we found out, I think, a week after press night that we were transferring. So the last 2.5 weeks of the show in Stratford, we all knew we were transferring. So I think that kind of energy of knowing that we're doing the show again, come autumn, meant that I don't know, like when you come to an end of a play, like you say, usually with a character, you try your best to put it to bed. Whereas this, I kind of took the last section of Stratford to be still character development because I knew that we were coming, back in the autumn. So I knew that if I put myself in a position where I felt, oh, I can still go deeper, then that meant over the summer that's just been, I could kind of let it settle into my subconscious and then go even deeper rather than putting it to bed and then picking it back up. So strangely, over this summer, I feel like when I've been traveling or out with friends, like I'd get more and more inspiration of what I can do to deepen this role. Yeah, and taking it to the Barbican now. I don't know if that answers your question, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that I felt because we knew we were transferring, I didn't put the character to bed in Stratford. I kind of left the door open so that we can put it to bed now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like the Buddha of Suburbia is a very London story. I was wondering how different do you think audience reactions will be, in London compared to in Stratford as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I mean, we have no idea. I mean, there's this two sides, which is one where we hope we can get a lot more people who, grew up in similar circumstances, being in London and it's set in London. I think the references will go further. But on the other side, we hear that London audiences can be harder to please. Or maybe not even that. It's that in Stratford, they were so amazing, the audiences. Like they were so willing to engage and so on board. So you hope that the London audiences feel the same thing, like they just want to, go with you. And I think they will. I think like you said, because it's set in London and it's such a London story, I feel like they will try and go along with us on the journey. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, definitely. I mean, the Buddha of Suburbia, it's such a well-beloved book before it became a play. What was it about this character and the story that really drew you in as an actor?
Yeah, I think like you said, it's just because it's such a the Hanif's writing is so rich, right? Like his language is so rich and he has this incredible disarming way of describing, growing up. Like his language is rich and disarming and then you just feel enveloped in this story. And I think that was the main thing for me as Karim. I remember getting the script through for the audition. And I remember saying to my agent at that time, I was like, it's one of those projects you get where you feel like just auditioning is enough because it's incredible how multifaceted and layered this South Asian character is written, and it was such a joy to even audition for it. So I think that's the main thing that drew me in is how multifaceted Kareem is and how much of a flawed person he is. Um, I think often in representation, you either get a very morally uprighteous, that's not a word, but morally, you know what I mean? Like a morally right character. You try and present diverse characters in that way, or you present them in a very one-dimensional way. With the great thing about Kareem is that he's so flawed, like all teenagers are. And I think that was a major draw to playing him because it was like, you can play actually what it was like growing up as a teenager, as a South Asian teenager. So I think that was a major thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kareem, he goes on such an incredible journey of, self-discovery. I was wondering, was there much of yourself in him too when you're playing him? And what have you learned about yourself as well whilst playing him too?
Yeah, it's a great question. What have I learned about myself? It's so true as well for actors because I feel like for every project you do, you learn a lot about yourself because trying to either find the truth of when you're trying to find the truth of these words, you know what automatically resonates with you, which is obviously showing a lot about your character, or what you find tough to resonate with, which is showing a lot about yourself as a character. With Kareem, I think the whole thing of Buddha of Suburbia is who am I? Because obviously he grows up, with a South Asian dad and an English mum, so he's constantly trying to find himself. Who am I? And I think that age-old question resonated with me deeply because I'm adopted from birth. I was adopted at 6 months old. So growing up, it was a constant question of who am I? And I tried to find myself through, my family who raised me, or, my cousins, or my school, or wherever it was. I constantly tried to search for who I was because ultimately, being adopted, you kind of had this sense of, I don't really know who I am. So that question of Kareem, I felt was very similar to me. So when he's, trying to find himself through acting, or when he's trying to see if he resonates with his auntie and uncle at the shop, or maybe he resonates with Charlie and his family, that was quite easy to dip into. In terms of differences, I think Kareem's a lot less analytical than I am. I tend to be quite an analytical person, whereas Kareem is just let's jump and see what happens. So I think that kind of mentality, or as Emma, the director, described it, he's got a little twinkle in his eye. It's this kind of twinkle of let's just go for it and see what happens. I think that was something I had to overcome as Dee stepping into Kareem, because that sense of being blasé is not really in my nature as Dee, but it's very much a fundamental aspect of Kareem, which is like, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what were those sorts of like initial conversations like with Emma Rice about how to, bring this story to the stage and how to tell Kareem's story in a theatrical way as well?
I think the wonderful thing about Emma is she almost is that what I was describing about Kareem, which is like just jump and see what happens. So Emma always, it never really gave you a lot of notes, and which was great as an actor. Sometimes in this case it was great as an actor. Sometimes you want the notes, but here it was just kind of like she gave you that implicit trust of being like, your instincts are right. She always used to say that your instincts are right. Just keep developing it. So through rehearsal process, she would keep telling me, just keep develop, keep trusting your instincts more and more because you're on the right path. And I think through that, we got to a place where Kareem was full bodied and full fleshed. I think as well with the opening of the show, it's kind of Kareem stands up there like a stand-up comic. And I think in that opening, we worked a lot on like I said, that word twinkle. Like she would
Mm.
keep telling me, keep twinkling. And I think that idea of twinkling is something, which we worked in a specific context of the opening, but it carries through the whole of the play, which is Kareem has a twinkle in his eye. So I think Emma, teaching me to trust my instincts and just keep going and to keep bringing it out to the audience and using words like twinkle naturally got the character to the place where it needs to be, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. I remember hearing Emma describe the role as being a bit like a modern Hamlet. Was it something that you
Right.
sort of like, agreed with as well? Like, that's how you were sort of like approaching it too?
Yeah, I mean that's something that she said in the last workshop. She said this is like your modern Hamlet, and definitely like yeah, I mean it's a great thing to think, isn't it? Doing a modern Hamlet, and I think it is in a lot of ways. It's a lot more fairy tale esque. I think Hanif described the Buddha as a fairy tale, and I think what I've been learning to do, or what I learned to do in Stratford, is to really lean into that because I think Emma's shows are so exuberant and abundant. And for me, the connotations of Hamlet are quite serious. I don't know, that word serious comes to mind. And I think when I first approached the work, what I felt didn't work with for me was approaching it in such a serious way, because there would be a kind of contradiction between the play Emma's made and what I'm trying to do as Karim, which is make it so serious and dark in some ways, which Hamlet is to me. So it's a modern day Hamlet in that it's like the abundant, exuberant version of Hamlet, or the fairy tale version of Hamlet.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of seeing the show, definitely. I know that this was only the second play that you've done since finishing the acting for screen course at Central as well.
Yeah.
I was wondering, were you always interested in acting for stage as well as on screen too?
I think because I got into acting a bit later in my life, I was always interested in screen work. So I think that's why I jumped into the screen masters. But like halfway through my masters, I was regretting my choice. Not that the course wasn't good. It was that I noticed that everyone on that course had a theatre background. And I think it can be a very fundamental thing for an actor to get that experience with stage. So I think halfway through my course, I was like, oh, I wish I did a more stage focused master's. So I think I was always interested in stage, and also just knowing that your craft develops so much by being on stage, because it's such a, for me anyway, such a psychologically testing forum, right? Like it's such a scary thing, like, before going on stage or performing in front of an audience. And I think because it's such a fearful thing, you develop a lot more as an actor. So I was really excited when I got that first play that I got to do, because I knew that it was something that I will develop my craft a lot, and it did. I learned so much during that first show.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting as well, I'm looking at your background, you studied economics prior to coming into acting. Why did you want to make that switch into an acting career?
I kind of, well, it's always been a pipe dream to be an actor, but no one kind of from my school went into acting, so it never felt like something you could do. I didn't do National Youth Theatre or anything like that, so I think coming out of school, it wasn't even a thing of, oh, I want to go to drama school and I can't. It was that I didn't really know it was a possible thing. Like, I didn't know really about drama schools. I didn't know they existed. So I went and did economics, and I enjoyed it. And in my last year of uni, of my undergrad, they did an open casting call for the Channel 4 show. It was called The State, and it was directed by Peter Kosminski. And they did like a nationwide search for the two young South Asian leads. So I had a friend who was at the film school in my undergrad, and she said to me and another friend, because on nights out we would get drunk and talk about wanting to be actors. She said, "Oh, they're doing this open casting call. You should just apply." So me and my friend went to the open casting call. It was Nina Gold casting, and it was Kate Bond from Nina Gold who was doing my audition, and it went really well, and she was really supportive, and I ended up going through the rounds. I got to the last round. I didn't get it, but Nina Gold and Kate and stuff were really helping me. They were like, "Look, if you want to take this seriously, I think you should. Like, after you finish your masters, you should, think about a drama school, or yeah, like getting some training." And they helped me out with some agents at that time. So I think because of that, I felt, the affirmation from the industry that, oh, this could be something I could do. So yeah, that's how I got into it.
Yeah, it's so interesting and so amazing hearing that journey. I know that obviously acting can be a very challenging profession to get into. I was wondering for you, was there a moment in your career so far where you look back and you go, that was, the moment where you had made it in the industry too?
Made it in the industry. That's a good, yeah. I don't know. It's tough, because I think that's just the nature of my personality, is that you always you do. My girlfriend always has to stop me and be like, this is what you wanted to do like 2 years ago, and now you're doing it. Because when you do something, it becomes normalized. So I have to learn to be, really grateful for what I have. I think definitely doing the play at the National, that felt like a big, like I said, I'd kind of yearned to do stage and to get that experience of being on stage. So when I got the show at the National, um, and I just remember the workshop for it being in that room, with Daniel Evans and Aleki Blythe, the playwright, and then the rest of the cast. And I just felt, wow, this is a great part, and I get to finally act. Because I think for a lot of unless you're very lucky, a lot of the early stages of your career, you're getting small parts. So you don't feel like you can really breathe into the part, or you don't have a lot to work with. Whereas the play at the National, it was like, oh, I've got, some material to work with. So I think that was the first point where I felt, oh, yeah, this is what it's all about. This is the joy of acting. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, our generation was such a terrific ensemble piece. I feel like everyone really got a chance to shine in that show. How much did that show evolve and change and develop, whilst you saw it, going from, workshops to Chichester and then back to the National again?
Yeah, it evolved a lot. I mean, it was like a 4.5 hour piece at the first preview. So your Aleki had done incredible work. So there were a lot of cuts and a lot of drama, just trying to make the piece concise and make certain storylines ping. I think it was only in Chichester where I felt like the play really started to sing a lot because we'd all settled in, to the rhythm, and it being a verbatim piece and recorded delivery, which meant that, we would listen to the recordings during rehearsal with earphones, and we'd have to completely imitate, exactly what we're hearing, and we couldn't really deviate from it. I struggled with that at the National because, again, being an analytical person, I would focus so much on trying to get the voice right that I would forget about my physicality. And I think in Chichester, myself and I think all of us started to really settle into the verbatim and let our physical bodies move as they wanted to while keeping the same tenure and tone of the verbatim piece. So it developed a lot, and there were always cuts. I think we got some cuts in Chichester. I think Aleki was always trying to make it more concise, and Daniel was always trying to make it more concise. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how challenging is it approaching a verbatim script? Does it make it harder to, to connect with a character like Zach as well?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think it did for me. Like, and maybe that was my inexperience. It was my first stage show, so my first play being on stage, and I felt I don't want to use the word restricted because that would assume that Aleki's style is restrictive. It's not restrictive because I found in Chichester the kind of openness you needed to make it work. But I restricted myself, I felt, during rehearsals and the National because of trying to, like I said, trying to mimic the voice exactly. And Aleki would be very strict with, oh no, your voice isn't as high there, or your voice is lower here, or you're not presenting it in the way. Listen to the recordings again. So I'd be in my head a lot. So I found it very challenging during rehearsals and going into the National. But then I learned to, like Emma's telling me now, trust your instincts and just let it all go and just go with it. And then I found verbatim to be very freeing because you could kind of go where the voice took you rather than analyzing, are you doing it right? And I think that's where the magic is in verbatim.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like our generation, it really gave a voice to a generation that was, going through, changing times and obviously affected by the pandemic as well. How do you think, future generations will look back at this time? And are you particularly optimistic about the future as well, in terms of, the industry and, where the world is heading to?
Yeah, I am really optimistic. Annoyingly optimistic, probably. And I get it's actually probably a privilege to be optimistic, which I don't doubt. But yeah, I feel like industry wise, it's changing. I'm a big believer in being able to access information doesn't mean it's getting worse. Like people will often compare, oh, 20 years ago, we didn't see this, we didn't see that. It's, yeah, but you didn't see it because it wasn't, you didn't have access to that information. So now our privilege is we have access to so much information, which means that we can improve things in a better way. And I think things are improving in the world, and I think things are getting better in the industry. I mean, obviously, there's still a lot of awful things that we need to work on, but I think as a whole, as a society, we're becoming more aware and becoming more compassionate um, of each other's voices, and letting voices that are different to us kind of shine. So yeah, I am optimistic.
Amazing. Yeah, just as the last question, what advice would you give to an aspiring young actor today?
What advice? Just I think honestly, just have fun and love yourself. Like the grass is not always greener. There's always going to be something more. I've had to learn that. And, I've seen success in people, and they're still wanting more and still unhappy. So you may think you want this thing and then you get it and you're still unhappy. I think it's Rick Rubin, who's a music producer, who said, the hardest times come when you achieve everything you thought would make you happy and then it doesn't. So I think that's what the advice I'd give to aspiring actors is learn to just love and enjoy, and know that whether you're doing a small part or a big part, or whatever you're doing community theatre, or you're doing the lead at the national in the Olivier, like the experience is largely the same. And if you learn to love whatever you're doing, it will put you in good stead for when your career does progress.
Definitely. Dee Ahluwalia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Carlos.